Hello, everybody. This is Jennifer Wickman with Cooperative Network. I'm the Director of Government Affairs, and we are so thrilled that you're able to join us today for our State of the State. You know, when everything went virtual, we were excited that we were still able to stay in contact with our members this way and get important information. And thank you so much for joining us for this exchange of information. We're doing other seminars as well, and the next one coming up is What's Next for the Ag Economy on August 4th. So please feel free to join that one as well, and keep an eye on our website, Cooperative Network, under the events page for what we're having coming up next. For today, this is the 30,000 view of what's happening in the state of Wisconsin, and I'm really thrilled that we get to start off with a video from the governor. He wasn't able to join us today, of course, but we were really thrilled that he could give us this overview in the form of a video. It's just a quick 7-minute video, but it's a nice way to start. And then I'll turn it over to J.R. Ross, one of the premier political journalists in the state, and I'll give him a longer introduction as we get closer to him. And then the cherry on top is we have Secretary Designee Randy Romanski for the last section of our seminar today. So one more thing I want to point out is if you have questions during this, please feel free to use the chat box on the bottom. That's how we'll be able to get your questions, and I'll share them with the speakers. Questions always make everything more interesting, so feel free to ask any questions. And with that, we're going to turn it over to the video of Governor Evers.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for inviting me to share a message with you all today. And thank you, Dan Smith, for your leadership and for allowing me to be with you for your virtual 2020 State of the State. 2020 has been no ordinary year. We've seen unprecedented public health challenges and resulting economic disruptions. And almost overnight, we changed the way we live and work and learn. But what I haven't been surprised by is how resilient Wisconsinites are. From Superior to Milwaukee, folks have worked to take care of each other and offer a helping hand. Unfortunately, COVID-19 has not gone away, and until we have a vaccine, we will have to continue to adjust and adapt to the path of this virus. And as we work on the public health recovery of our state, we're getting to work on our economic recovery as well. Wisconsin farmers, small business owners, and workers have been emotionally, mentally, and financially impacted by this pandemic, and it is our commitment as a state to continue to do whatever we can to do to support folks during this time. We started by investing the federal CARES funding in the places that needed it most. From our $75 million grant program for Wisconsin small businesses and the Wisconsin Farm Support Program, providing $50 million worth of direct aid to farmers, to investing in direct care providers serving underserved communities in our state, including rural health clinics, and our $200 million Roots to Recovery grant program for local communities to address their most urgent and unique COVID-19 recovery needs. As we look ahead to the economic future of our state, there isn't an industry or region that doesn't have trouble on the horizon. Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation released a report on the economic state of our state and outlined recovery priorities. The report calls for the state to focus on getting everyone back to work. Our workforce looks a little different these days, and it will be crucial to reskill and train folks for new jobs, as well as ensure access to quality childcare and health care for our workers. We also need to support innovation. It fuels job growth as well as flexibility and resiliency, and Wisconsin's entrepreneurial spirit could be a catapult for our recovery. And finally, we need to ensure that every business owner, farmer, worker, and student has access to high-speed broadband. This pandemic has really highlighted the digital divide in our state, and unless we make major investments in broadband, our rural communities will continue to get left behind. That's why I'm proud that in our budget we were able to invest $48 million to expand our broadband expansion grant program to reach more underserved areas of our state. This is the largest state investment in broadband in the history of the program. We also announced last week the Governor's Task Force on Broadband Access, which consists of stakeholders across industry and representing various communities. This group is tasked with going beyond funding and finding innovative, creative solutions to the broadband disparities in our state. I look forward to their good work later this summer and into the fall. Because you all know as well as I do that broadband access is not a luxury but a necessity, especially as we continue to navigate COVID-19. All of these priorities are great places to start, but we have to start. The people of Wisconsin deserve a productive effort in this challenge to all of us. It has been over 100 days since the federal government passed the CARES Act and needed the federal partners to step up to the plate to provide further meaningful relief for the workers, business owners, and people of our state. Now, among the work we have been doing on COVID-19, we're also working on many of the priorities we had laid out prior to the pandemic. And that includes our efforts to bolster the agriculture industry and our rural communities. As you know, back in January, I called for a special session on rural prosperity and support for our farmers. This included a package of legislation crafted after meeting and talking with folks in the field. Unfortunately, the Republican leaders chose not to meet or address this critical issue before they gavelled out for this legislative session. But we are still moving forward with the Blue Ribbon Commission on Rural Prosperity, as well as the Office of Rural Prosperity at the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation. Because before the COVID-19 pandemic hit, Wisconsin's rural communities were facing challenges to their very survival. It's more important than ever to listen to the concerns of our rural residents and support them in finding solutions so that their industry and our state can bounce back together. We also announced just a few weeks ago more than $160 million in general transportation aid that went out to local governments. This is part of our budget, which made historic new investments in our roads and bridges after years of neglect. Funding for local roads is an important part of economic development in our state, whether it's getting to work or school or transporting goods to market. So DOT Secretary Designee Thompson and I are excited to get these payments out to local communities. These are just a few of the many ways we're working across the state, across industries, and connecting the dots to ensure our state is able to bounce back and move forward from the impacts of COVID-19 on our families, workers, and communities. So I look forward to continuing to do this good work with all of you. Thank you very much.
I hope that you all enjoyed hearing from Governor Evers. I know Cooperative Network has been very thankful for how he's been directing so much of the CARES money, and we really look forward to working with him on a lot of the upcoming initiatives, and most especially broadband. With that, I'm excited to turn this over to J.R. Ross. He's one of the foremost political journalists in Wisconsin, has been for more than 20 years. He's editor-in-chief of WisPolitics and regularly writes for other publications such as Madison Magazine. I know I and all the other lobbyists I know watch him every Friday for the Week of Review on Wisconsin Eye. And that's something that all the rest of you can do as well. It's a free news publication. You just have to go to Wisconsin Eye on the website and you can watch it at any time. And it's really excellent news, a nice roundup of the week. So I recommend it to everybody. Cooperative Network is just really thrilled to have you. Thank you, JR. I'll turn it over to you now.
Thanks for having me, Jennifer. So you guys know, Jennifer kind of asked me to give an overview of the legislative races to start. And I'm going to start maybe at a unique place with that conversation, that is Donald Trump. And I know you're probably wondering, well, why Donald Trump? Why talk about the president? We're talking about the legislature. Well, it's simple. Donald Trump sucks up more oxygen, political oxygen, than any politician I've ever covered in my years of doing this. And he drives a conversation in a way that nobody else does. And on top of all that, typically in Wisconsin, we see legislative races where what happens top of the ticket trickles down to lower level races. And there's this third thing that's kind of unique this year. Typically in Wisconsin, we have something else on the ballot, so the president. So this year we have for a statewide race. This year we have the president, we have congressional races, most of which aren't going to be competitive, and then legislature. So there's less of room on the ballot to drop off for a voter. I know that seems maybe kind of a little bit odd, but if you think about 2018, if you went down the ballot, you voted for governor, attorney general, secretary of state, treasurer, U.S. Senate, and then legislature, Congress, then legislature. There's a known drop off in voting. This time, you have Trump driving the conversation more than maybe years past, and less room for people to forget about how they vote Donald Trump when they go to vote for the legislature. Now, let's not forget Joe Biden's conversation. The Trump campaign wants to make this election this fall a choice. They feel like they have a better shot of winning re-election if it's a choice between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. Joe Biden, who gets criticized for being in his basement and that kind of thing, not being out public, he wants to be a referendum on Trump. The more it's a referendum on Donald Trump, the more problems the president has, and this is why. Look, if you look at the president's numbers, I have never seen an incumbent politician recover the numbers that I'm seeing right now for the president. Never. But people like me who do what we do are petrified of being wrong again. Because in 2016, we saw all these polls that had Hillary Clinton leading the president, or then Donald Trump, and businessmen Donald Trump, and said, okay, there's no way. Well, now we're in a position where we see polls with a bigger lead for Joe Biden, and we're all kind of going, okay, I'm seeing all these signs of trouble for the president, but we saw what happened 4 years ago. Can the president define Joe Biden in the next 2 days, 3 days, something like that? Is there a way to do that for a guy who's been in office for 40 years, who people know quite well? Can you somehow change the perception of this guy in the last 3.5 months of this election? Maybe. Can the president somehow rehabilitate his image? Maybe. Can he stay on message for 3 months? Maybe, though probably not. He's proven so far that we have the ability to do that. But we're all cautious in this business of like the unknown. Could the polls be wrong again? Sure. But here are a couple things I want you to keep in mind about this election, okay, 3.5 months out. Again, depending on what poll you look at, Joe Biden's up 8-9 points nationally, okay? I've seen a politician lose a bigger lead, though I was in middle school when it happened. Michael Dukakis in 1988, he had a giant lead in George Bush and lost. But if you go back and look at that election, I went and pull this up, the right track, wrong track number in 1988 ahead of the election was 46% of people believe the country was going in the right direction, and 41% that was going the wrong track. The NBC poll that we saw just this past week, it showed that only 19% of people in this country think that we're going the right direction. Again, I've never seen somebody survive that kind of number. 72% thought we're going the wrong direction. So how do you recover from that? The answer is I don't know. But it's Donald Trump, and we're afraid of saying he can't do it because he proved us wrong before. So there's your stage. Donald Trump is going to dominate the airways between now and November. Wisconsin is if not the tipping point in the election. We're going to get a ton of attention. So you add all that up, and I get the impression from talking to people that the presidential race will drive the conversation for the legislature. Now, we have a few examples in Wisconsin of incumbent lawmakers who have been able to out from the top of the ticket, who even though a Democrat wins the top of the ticket, a Republican, they win their seat, and vice versa. My question this fall is, can those folks who have done that do that again? Maybe, but it could be even tougher this year. And then if they can't, it's all about the top of the ticket. And let's look at the top of the ticket dynamic a little bit in Wisconsin. In 2018, then Governor Walker lost Wisconsin by 1.1 points. Tammy Baldwin won Wisconsin by 10.8 points. Walker won 63 assembly seats. Baldwin won 59. It tells me a couple of things. One, Republicans drew really, really, really good maps in 2011 that helped them withstand something like what happened with Baldwin. Two, if we see Trump get into a situation where a Biden wins by 8, 9, 10 points, that map expands dramatically. Flip side, if Trump does well, if Trump wins Wisconsin again, that 2/3 majority that Republicans want in both houses within reach, and that is a real danger for Governor Evers. Yes, there is the whole thing where it negates a veto on a bill. The bigger picture, though, is if Republicans get 2/3 majorities and even that 3 seats in both houses, they can override an Evers veto on the new map. What I'm referring to is every 10 years, we draw new lines in Wisconsin for legislative districts and congressional districts. In 2011, Republicans did a great job of drawing a really good map that took advantage of some of the geographic advantages that they have to really lock in Republican majorities. We're all assuming that come January, barring something crazy happening where Democrats went back control of both house legislature, which would be a minor miracle in modern day politics, that Republicans will draw maps, Evers will veto them, and will go to the courts. The question is which one. All right. If Republicans, however, net those 3 seats, and there's a path for them to do it, when they draw those maps and Evers vetoes them, they override that veto. They have locked in now for their decade very favorable lines that help them keep control, even though the top of the ticket sometimes goes against them. So where is it going to matter the most? Well, if you look at the big picture of the maps in the Assembly and the Senate, the fights are going to be in the suburbs, largely around Milwaukee, but there are also these little pockets of seats to watch. And I'm going to go, I start in the Assembly and go clockwise. So if I start like around 4 o'clock, I have Jim Ott over Menominee Falls, Republican. Billy Clinton won his seat by about 4 points in 2016. He survived that. He's a guy who used to be on TV as a meteorologist. Can that profile help him break through that top of the dynamic? Because we're not seeing President Trump do better in suburbs. He's doing worse. So what happens with Jim Ott? Now I'll go to Democrat, Robin Vining. She won her seat in 2018, even though Governor Walker won it. It's Governor Walker's old Assembly seat. But there you have that shifting dynamic of the suburbs against Republicans. Can she hold on to that? Rob Hutton in Brookfield, another guy that in 16, the race was really close. Top of the ticket, Clinton lost by 1.5 points. But here's a guy who's a vulnerable incumbent, only raised $1,100 for 6 months of the year. That's kind of a warning sign. And we keep going over now to Todd Novak, Republican in Dodgeville. There's a seat where Democrats can do really well at top of the ticket, but it's the one area of the state that I consistently see people split their votes. Traditionally, Democrats win southwestern Wisconsin. Governor Evers did, but all 3 assembly seats went for Republicans in 2018. Can Todd Novak withstand that dynamic again? And it's only about a point or 2 in 16 when he won, but if it's 5, 6, 7 points, now you're talking about trouble area. Go farther up the Mississippi River to Steve Doyle, a Democrat in the Onalaska area. Trump won that district by 4 points in 2016. There's an example of a guy who, because he was on the county board for a long time, had his own kind of brand, he was able to stay in that top of the ticket. But in this really polarized environment that we're in, can he repeat that formula? Republicans also will tell you, quite frankly, they had not run great candidates against him the last couple of cycles. This time they're a little more eyeing him. Then swing up north to like 11 and 12 o'clock. You have Nick Milroy in South Range and Beth Myers next door in Ashland. These are districts where Trump did well, rural, blue collar, really white districts that have traditionally been Democratic, but they're culturally a little bit more moderate. They're definitely not the Isthmus of Madison, okay? What happens up there this time? On the one hand, Trump did well in 16, but if you look at the May special election in which Tom Tiffany, state senator Republican, beat Trish's uncle, the Democrat, for that congressional seat, those assembly districts performed a lot like they usually do in a normal quote unquote year, i.e. the Democrats did pretty well. That might bode well for them. But there's your kind of the ones to watch this fall. And you'll see Milroy and Myers, that rural Wisconsin thing. Is it Trump territory again? Ott, Vining, Hutton, that suburban thing. Do Republicans perform better in the suburbs than they did in 16 and 18? If they don't, they're in trouble. Now look in the state Senate. It's an interesting map too, because there, you have a mesh of like Western Wisconsin, again, a place that Trump did well. And if you go back 4 years ago, Dan Kapanke, Republican, who won that seat in 04 and 08, lost it in 2011 recall election, Jennifer Schilling. He's running again. 4 years ago, Trump lost that seat by about 4 points, and Kapanke lost that Senate seat by 61 votes. If Trump keeps it 4 or 5 points again, Kapanke can beat the Democratic nominee. We think it's going to be Brad Pfaff, the former DATCP secretary, though there are a couple of Democrats he faces in the primary. But if that seat performs like it did under Tammy Baldwin, where she was at 60% of the vote, that's a really tough mountain to climb for anybody, no matter how well known you are. Go up Mississippi River to western Wisconsin, Patty Shotner. She won a plus 17 Trump district in 2018 special election, that's pretty impressive. It was the first sign of the blue wave coming to Wisconsin in 18. Now she is a very vulnerable incumbent in a district that's very, very expensive to advertise in because it's Twin Cities media. Also, you have more people from Minnesota moving in that district all the time. It's changing. Will it change enough that suburban vote can help Patty survive? Difficult path, to say the least. Let's swing around now to the Green Bay area. Dave Hansen, the retiring center, has always outperformed top the ticket. That guy is like, had a magical touch in Green Bay. Trump did really, really, really well in Green Bay 4 years ago. So much that when I was looking at the Marquette University Law School poll every month and seeing like the Trump and Ron Johnson was in Green Bay, I was like, no way, there's something off. Because how is Russ Feingold doing so poorly in Green Bay? Well, because of Hillary Clinton. She's a very disliked person, candidate, a long time reputation, and people didn't like her or Trump. They said, hey, I'll take a devil I don't know versus the one that I do. Now, Green Bay, McKee area again, you have Hansen's nephew and Jonathan Hansen, who is the preferred candidate. He has a primary in August, but we're looking at Jonathan Hansen as kind of the one we think's going to get through. Eric Wimberger's Republican, ran 4 years ago against Dave Hansen, wasn't a great candidate. He's been running for a while, raised $6,000 the first half of the year. Now, I hate to use money as the end-all be-all in politics, but let's be honest, it really helps you communicate a message if you have money. If you don't, then you have to either figure a way to raise it or have the campaign committee, the Republican State Senate campaign committee, come in and save you, pump a bunch of money into your race to help you out. Well, those folks make decisions. Are we going to protect incumbents or go play offense somewhere? And they will, our first instance is protect incumbents and help them. If there's money left over, they go to you. So that's a challenge for Republicans there. Those 3 seats are the best ones for Republicans to pick up. And actually the only ones they have a shot, because the map is, there are so few Dem seats left that are really in play that's one place they can go. But there is a path there. For Democrats, we're looking, okay, Alberta Darling is in suburban Milwaukee. It's a pretty Republican seat. If the floor just drops out for President Trump this fall, I mean, like we're talking 40%, that seat might be in play. You know, I still, when talking to people, get the impression that Alberta should be okay, but that's that unknown of like, how will this presidential race turn out? That'll drive that race. If you go up now to Pat Teston in kind of Stevens Point area, that seat was a long time rural Democratic seat, like blue collar Dems. Judah Lassa had it, Kevin Shabilsky had it. That Trump wave came in 16 and washed away that kind of Democratic lawmaker in that area. Pat's got a bunch of money stashed away, but the guy running against him also had a good fundraising period. So maybe, but again, it has to be a good year for Democrats. Joe Biden has to appeal to those blue collar rural Dems or past Dems, bring them back and fold to make that one competitive. And really that's about it. Now there's a second tier of races in each house, like the Assembly, a couple of more suburban Milwaukee seats that they shouldn't ever be competitive, but if it's bad enough, they could be. Up in the Green Bay area, John Mako, his district is a little bit suburban-y, that De Pere area. So you kind of keep an eye on that. But for Republicans, are telling me it's only if it gets bad, they worry about those seats, and it could get bad. If it gets good for them, though, that's when that two-thirds majority comes in. And then there's the money factor. And this is something that I've never seen in my years covering politics. The State Democratic Party raised $10 million in a 3-month period. To put it in perspective, the Republicans used to really clean up in terms of fundraising to the parties. If you go back years ago, there was not a limit on how much money parties could raise for individual contributions, but there was a de facto contribution limit because it was $10,000 per donor per year. So if you were a donor, you said, okay, am I going to give to the state party or give to candidate X? Well, you gave to candidate X. The parties were kind of weak. Well, a series of federal court rulings wiped out a lot of those limits. And so when Republicans rewrote the finance laws in 2015, they allowed political parties to still have no contribution limit, but also to make unlimited transfers to campaigns. The argument was from Rahm Emanuel, Assembly Speaker, was that, look, we have all this money flowing to these dark money groups, these ones that run the ads, Joe Blow's a horrible person, call Joe Blow and tell him how much he stinks. Those groups get all the money because it's not reportable. If we change the law for parties, it'll strengthen them and it'll be reportable. So reporters, it'll be good for you because you'll get all these reports. You can go through and find out who's giving. Well, Republicans did a great job on that new structure with Scott Walker in office, because when you have the East Wing, you have a reason for people to give you money, right? I mean, not saying that money buys things in the Capitol, but it buys you an audience oftentimes. So Republicans did a great job of raising that money, cleaned up with big figure checks from the Hendricks of the world, did great. Well, Scott Walker loses. Ben Wickler becomes the new state party chair in Wisconsin for Democrats. Ben came from a background working for MoveOn.org, national kind of progressive organization, had these national fundraising connections. So he was like a perfect political fundraising storm for Democrats. You have one, this guy who's got these connections nationally to raise money. Two, you have a small dollar network that really was built up during the recall elections and the Federal Act 10 they could keep hitting on. You have the governor now, governor's office, to have him making calls to vouch for your state party. Say, hey, this is a good guy. He's got a good plan. Let's, my friends all across the country give money here. And oh, by the way, Wisconsin is one of the tipping points, again, if not the tipping point, the presidential election. And there is a class of very wealthy Democrats across this country who are, to be honest, petrified of the idea of a second Trump term. They're looking to give. You add all that stuff together and you get $10 million in three months. J.B. Pritzker, the Illinois governor, gave almost $2.5 million in one shot. That illustrates the power of deep pocketed donors. He basically the Democrats outraised the Republicans just off of J.B. Pritzker, basically, in this 3-month period. It's really impressive.
Jared, will you talk a minute too about why Wisconsin is, again, so important in the presidential election?
Absolutely. So it's not that we've been close. We were close in 16, we were close in 4, close to 2000. All three of those nights, I saw the sun rise, basically, come the presidential election. Obama was the exception in 8 and 12. He was just a unique figure in terms of bringing people together. But now fast forward to 20, and Democrats have pledged not to make the same mistake they made in 2016, was neglect the blue wall, they call it. It's Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania. They had all gone Democratic. Every presidential race is like, I think, 1988 or something like that. But they have profiles of blue collar states. We don't have a really high number of college graduates in Wisconsin. We're not terribly diverse. We're kind of a Democratic, light bluish state most of the time. Well, Hillary Clinton thought, I could clean up on this guy in 2016, said, I'm going to go to Arizona, which is now a swing state, but wasn't 4 years ago. I can go to Georgia. I can go places to try and build this massive majority in the Senate and really have something to do, with my first term. Well, she made a bad miscalculation. So Democrats dusted off, said, okay, we're not going to make that mistake again in 2020. And Wisconsin is so important because if you look at the demographics of Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, we're a little whiter, a little less educated, a little smaller. If Trump's not winning Wisconsin, he's not winning Michigan, he's not winning Pennsylvania. So he's got to win here. Start doing math. He can lose Pennsylvania and Michigan and still win the presidency by winning every state he won 4 years ago. Only holds Wisconsin. He loses all three. He's got to find somewhere else. Now, where else do you go? Do you go to Minnesota? Maybe. They haven't voted for Democrat or Republicans since I can't remember, Reagan, maybe 84. No, Mondale won that 84. Like the 70s, I think it was, for last time Minnesota went Republican in the presidential election. Do you go to a New Mexico that Trump lost by like 7 or 8 points? Do you go to an Oregon? These are not great states for Republicans. You go to Colorado, where Trump's down double digits. So he has to have Wisconsin because it's that linchpin of that dynamic of if he's appealing to the voters he appealed to 4 years ago, he's going to win Wisconsin, he's going to win Minnesota or Michigan and Pennsylvania. Unless Democrats can say, okay, you still got your folks, we're going to re-energize people in Milwaukee, re-energize rural Democrats around again. So he has to have Wisconsin to win the presidency this year.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you. Because we're talking about so much politics, and especially because of what you've just said, do you think what do you think about the chances of, even though we're in the midst of this pandemic, of the legislature coming back for any bills, or is everybody just concentrating on November 3rd right now?
I keep asking leadership every week, are you guys coming back? What's going on? And I keep getting just a nod, a shake of the head. I mean, there are a couple bills that have been introduced, but there's no real rush to come in for anything. One thing is we're going to deal with a budget deficit at some point. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm really kind of a budget geek and a political geek, so I'll sorry if I get too wonky, but the first year of the budget, we actually might be okay. We might not need a budget repair bill, and this is why. 1, we began this budget with such a huge surplus going in that if you look at the way that Evers built his budget, a lot of money got spent in year one and it carried over to like year two, a really expensive year. But we had that cushion in year one. So we started with a big cushion. The pandemic really impacted the last quarter of the year, and we have a rainy day fund. So if you add all that stuff up, we might actually survive okay. And that means you don't have to come in and do a budget repair bill anytime soon. Now, floor drops out, different story, but we will know probably late August how bad it is. Talking to Bob Lang at Fiscal Bureau, the director over there, he's told me that until he sees the July 15th receipts, because remember they pushed back their reporting deadline to July 15th, until he sees those receipts, you won't know for sure how we're doing. That's going to be like sometime in late August. That would be a reason to come back. Otherwise, what's your reason to come back right now? The DNC drink a bar bill. Remember, there's a bill back this spring, this big debate about whether to allow later hours to DNC to have the bars open in Milwaukee. Well, that's a moot point right now, right? There are lots of priorities that got pushed aside. The public say, hey, we can take it back up next session and take care of them in January if we wanted to. There's not a pressing issue to come back for. Evers wants to take up police reforms. There's not really an appetite for Republicans to do that in a pressing way. And two, when it comes back to that budget dynamic, do you really think lawmakers want to vote on a repair bill in October? No, they want a campaign. And it's a unique environment to campaign in because you have going door to door is kind of difficult. You know, what are you going to do if it becomes an knock to your door and say, I want to talk to you for 5 minutes about why I'm running for office? Well, you got to answer the door, you know, talk to them. So I think they're focused on how to campaign in a unique environment versus there's just not a big push right now to be on the floor to take things up.
And with that said, if the legislature is not going to do anything, what do you see the chances of the governor trying to act again across the state? People are wondering about statewide mask mandates. They're wondering about statewide school mandates, and also what's going to happen. Would he do anything with private schools? If all the public schools are closing in the cities, is he going to do anything with the private schools there?
Well, with the mandate, he's told us basically that if he tried something, he's sure that the Republicans would sue him, and he's sure that he would lose the Supreme Court. So he said basically he's not really having an appetite to do it. He told us last week, I think it was, that a business person encouraged him to do a mask mandate anyway. But he wasn't really excited about it. Now with the school thing, Evers, don't forget, he's former state superintendent, has said he wants schools to open, but he also has to be a local decision. And as far as we tell right now, he's leaving all the locals that what they want to do. Department of Public Instruction has provided some kind of overview of like, here's some guidance. We have stuff from the CDC, from the federal government, but Evers is saying it's a local decision. I want them to make it. Now I talked to you like with the private school thing. I asked one of my sources in kind of the school choice movement yesterday, like, okay, well, what do you guys think about this? And the answer was they believe local health departments have the power to close all schools, including private ones. But what they're looking at is, okay, is there an equal application issue here where you're closing schools, but you're letting bars open, or you're letting salons open, or tattoo parlors? Is there a way to challenge that in court? So one thing in my 20 years of doing this, I never thought I'd spent so much time in court covering stuff. I've been a very good courts reporter, I've been a Capitol reporter. So I have a feeling we're probably going to go back to court at some point, have a discussion about that, barring some changes from local health, especially in Milwaukee. Obviously, that's where the real heart of the choice movement is in Wisconsin. So local department there, they just said no school in person. So watch what happens there for a lawsuit.
That brings up a good point. I haven't really noticed if there are a lot of lawsuits going on right now about the mask mandates, because they're also all sprinkled around.
I've not seen one over Dane counties yet, which I thought was kind of surprising. I thought maybe they're, especially with the bars, I thought there might be a lawsuit over that. There was a federal suit about the various things, but that was dismissed, I think, recently. So, but we really haven't seen anything gain traction just yet. What's clear has happened is after the state Supreme Court issued its ruling in mid-May, the locals now are taking the baton and doing what they want to do. It is a mishmash of regulations around the state. We were up north month ago. There wasn't any restrictions in place up there. I live on the east side of Madison. You know, there are restrictions what we do. I'm on our Little League board, and we have restrictions on like practices and what we can do with crowds. It's just, that's the way it's going to stay, I think, for right now, because in talking to folks, there's just not a clear, there's nothing we don't think the government can do anything like try and mandate, but until the lawsuit is successful against a local thing, they're going to stay in place.
And do you think that we've heard all we're going to hear from the Department of Public Instruction on it too? They came out with their guidelines, and then the locals are picking, following that with regard to what's happening in their locality, but I don't think we're going to see something else from them. Do you?
I've not seen signs of it, but we're still in mid-July. My kids go to Madison schools. We just got the email last week. They're going all virtual to start, at least through October 30th. So, and don't forget with that whole debate about opening schools, it's not just about education, it's also about politics. For President Trump, he needs the economy to rebound to have a shot to win re-election. It's no coincidence that his numbers started to dip right when the economy started to go south and COVID-19 became a huge concern for people. And they went, you know what, I'm not happy with how he's doing things. To get the economy back on track, think about it. If you have kids in second and third grade, where do you put them when you go to work? If you don't, how do they learn on their own if you're not there? So for him, he wants those schools open to allow us to go back to work and have that avenue. Now we're lucky, our boys are 13 and 15, they mostly pay attention. What we tell them to do when it comes to like learning and doing their classwork. But I don't know what I would have done if they were in second, fourth grade versus, going into 8th and 10th grade this fall. Now I can work from home because of what I do. That's great. My wife can too, but we're in a unique situation. Not everybody has that ability. So watch for the pressure that might come from federal government about this issue. Don't forget, it's interesting too that for years, conservatives have argued that education is a local issue. Now you have a president, a Republican president, saying he wants to dictate from the federal government what schools do. I was reading this morning, a new story about the negotiations over the next coming COVID-19 bill. The president, the White House wants some kind of strings attached to federal money for schools to reopen. I don't know that Democrats are going to go for that. I'm not really covering the congressional delegation very closely. I don't know Nancy Pelosi, so I can't tell you what she's going to do. But the feeling people I talk to is they're not going to go for that kind of a provision in the bill if they had the druthers.
Just to make you repeat it, you can easily see Madison and Milwaukee schools and those surrounding areas all staying virtual until October 31st, but other schools within Wisconsin in more rural areas opening up.
Yeah, it's a local decision right now. So barring the governor issuing some kind of order, it's a local decision. And unless he changes his mind from a week ago where he said it's up to locals, the ball's in their court right now. But don't forget, we're also seeing cases spike. So at what point do you say, if you're the governor, okay, this is too much, you need to do something. Now they're also spiking in places in Dane, Milwaukee, and Brown counties where they do have various things, a mask ordinance in place. They do have local health officials who are dictating about schools. So that may be enough, but also he doesn't have a cooperative legislature to work with on something like this right now either.
Well, thank you. That was exactly the sort of 30,000 feet we were really hoping to cover. I'm wondering if there are any questions out there, and just so everybody knows, Michael is our brains behind this, and I'm not seeing questions right now. So Michael, if there are any, you're gonna have to let me know. Do you have anything left to finish up, JR?
I'll give you a quick congressional rundown.
Okay.
So the only race I'm watching is Western Wisconsin, Ron Kynes' district. They have an interesting candidate for Republicans, Derek Van Orden, who is a former Navy SEAL. But again, in 16, Trump won that seat by 4.5 points. It went back to being a plus Dem seat for Evers in 18. Unless Trump is close again, that seat, Ron Kynes probably in good shape, but keep an eye on that. In the 5th Congressional District, open seat, Jim Sitzbrenner is retiring. Senator Leader Scott Fitzgerald is the favorite to win that primary. Gentleman Clifton Temple is running against him for the GP nomination. Very Republican seat, whoever wins the primary likely wins the seat. Mr. Temple raised $102,000 last reporting period. Of that, 100 grams is his own money. Not a great sign. You're taking on somebody like Scott Fitzgerald, who's well known. And why I bring that race up is because if Fitz leaves the Capitol, you're going to have an interesting fight for the next majority leader of that Senate caucus, assuming Republicans hold the Senate again. But that caucus has been, I call it the Fitz slow jam. He has found a way to kind of lead that very disparate caucus on big issues. He lets them find balance and closes the deal.
Yeah.
What I'm wondering is, can anybody else in that caucus who wants to become a majority leader, whether it's Roger Roth, Chris Kappinga, Howard Markline, Dan Fine, surely there's somebody out, can they manage that caucus the same way, especially with a few seats that are changing this fall that could bring in more conservative voices?
Yeah.
So how's that going to work? Luther Olson's not going to be there anymore. It used to be kind of this moderate group of Luther, Rob Coles in Green Bay, and Jerry Petrowski in up north Marathon County. One of those guys is gone. So it's a different dynamic going forward. But that's what next session is going to be interesting for you to cover, is watching how that all plays out.
Very, very interesting. Thank you. As you're talking, I'm thinking to myself, I'm going to have to come back and rewatch this, because you know all the races so well. So that gives me an opportunity to remind everybody that this is recorded. So if anybody's like me and wants to watch this again later, that feel free to do that. But with that, I'll say thank you very much, JR. This was wonderful.
Hey, thanks for having me. Have a great day, everybody. Take care. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. And now I have the pleasure of introducing Secretary Romanski. We were so thrilled and honored that he's going to be able to join us. I think he's just going to figure out how to get his video up, and while I introduce him. Rainer Romanski was announced as Secretary Designee of the Wisconsin Department of Ag, Trade and Consumer Protection just this June in 2020. And prior to this appointment, he served as DATCP Deputy Secretary since January 2019 and Interim Secretary since November 2019. He brings decades of experience in government and policy development. He's also extremely reachable and responsive, especially during this pandemic. I've been especially impressed and thankful for the weekly calls. During the beginning of the pandemic, he set up industry stakeholder meetings for every single component, so from ag lenders to dairy farmers. And that was super helpful to get emergency information out, like how we can stay open and how we can get things out. And then since then, things have shifted more to connecting our Wisconsin wonderful ag products to consumers directly through the farmer, and also how to help with the food insecure. So I just think the department, as big as it is, has been extremely nimble and very responsive. And thank you for wearing your mask, but if you don't mind, you don't have to keep it on for the seminar. But thank you very much for joining us, Secretary Romanski.
Thanks, Jennifer, and thanks to all of you for having me on here today. I'm going to start off, Jennifer, by saying I really love the sign over your right shoulder. So I'm looking at that saying, excellent placement, and we're all in with you on that message. Thanks for allowing me to join you virtually today. I'm glad that you're able to continue to convene as a membership. Obviously, during COVID-19, we're all operating a little differently. And that means for our staff, we're working heavily remotely, and we have our staff, whether they're in the office or in the field, wearing masks. A lot of times when they're in the field, they're coming in contact with a lot of people, and one of the things we're doing is trying to be conscious of that. So whether we're in the building or whether we're out in the field, we wear a mask. So it's just one of the ways that we've all changed how we operate. So as long as we're talking about how COVID-19 is affecting all of us, one of the things I guess I wanted to start with, and Jennifer, thanks for that very kind introduction. I thought it would be valuable to maybe just focus a little bit on DATCP's efforts during the pandemic. And one of the things that we've tried to focus on is trying to be nimble, as you indicated. How do we help pivot and keep essential businesses working during this really challenging time? Governor Evers repeatedly recognized the essential nature of agriculture in Wisconsin. Even during a pandemic, essential agricultural production, processing, and distribution never stopped working to feed Wisconsin, the region, the nation, and the world. What we saw with COVID-19 was really sudden disruptions that were felt throughout the food supply chain. And it started initially with the dairy industry, where unfortunately we had a supply disruption when retail and schools closed down. That led some farmers to have to make a really difficult decision to dispose of milk. We saw when there were some adjustments in the meat and meat processing livestock industry, where there were some temporary slowdowns and some supply chain disruptions there too. And through each of those and everything else, at DATCP, we really focused on two main goals: helping to keep food on Wisconsin shelves and support the industry we serve. As Jennifer indicated, we maintain frequent and regular communication with our stakeholders, trying to work with them to identify issues and try to facilitate solutions wherever possible. That's a partnership. We thought it was really important that we reach out to the organizations and be a resource. And we also worked with groups representing farmers that requested $50 million in direct aid payments. As Governor Evers indicated, he fulfilled that request. And a really quick note here, we assembled a group of organizations and individuals representing farmers and agriculture that helped us with the setting up the parameters for that program. A special thank you to Dan Smith from the Cooperative Network for being part of the discussion points, for the part of the discussion that helped us set the guidelines up for how we were going to distribute that $50 million in direct aid payments. So thank you to Dan. We've worked to assist Wisconsin food processors and agribusinesses by issuing guidance where appropriate and addressing challenges as they arose. Right during the middle of the pandemic, well, actually early on in the pandemic, our field inspectors mostly worked to a remote situation where instead of doing on-site inspections, we went to wellness checks where we just checked in with businesses. How are you doing? How are things going? Is there anything we can do? We'll see you again sometime. And now that we are back out in the field with our inspectors, and this is an interesting part, a lot of people talk about the regulatory aspects of the Department of Ag, Trade, and Consumer Protection. Clearly, we do have a regulatory component. But the other part of what we do is partnership. And what we're finding now as our inspectors are going back out in the field with all appropriate personal protective equipment, they're interacting with businesses, and the businesses are telling our staff, it's good to see you again. It's a sense of normalcy. It's a sense of we're working together to continue on with this venture. And that's important, and it's also good for our agency to have that relationship. We did work with connecting with the Food Insecurity Network, trying to connect the dots between Wisconsin farmers and processors so that we can distribute safe and nutritious food to those who need it most. A good example of this is the Dairy Recovery Program. Again, going back to the earlier days where there was milk disposal going on in Wisconsin, America's Dairyland, and we worked with the Hunger Task Force of Wisconsin, dairy farmers of Wisconsin, and worked to make sure that milk was being, instead of being disposed of, was being purchased, farmers getting a fair price, and that milk was going to people who were food insecure. The other thing I'll say too, and members of the cooperative network were part of this, there were very generous donations of cheese and dairy products to those who were food insecure. And I think that's commendable, it's appreciated, and it was really timely. So in addition to our work here in Wisconsin, we've continued to advocate for farmers with our federal partners, assistance, support, and clarity when needed. Another part of what we've been doing is communicating regularly with the legislature. We continue to welcome their input and ideas on how to address the critical issues facing the industry. The governor referenced the special session on agriculture. I think there are a lot of issues in there that we believe that there's a lot of agreement on, so we're going to continue to work to emphasize the importance of supporting Wisconsin agriculture in good times and bad. We've been fortunate, Jennifer referenced a couple of these programs, so I'll give a little more detail. The Wisconsin Farm Support Program, that's the $50 million that the governor's made available as a direct to Wisconsin farmers. Payments were mailed on Tuesday of last week and direct deposited on Wednesday. There were almost 12,000 eligible applicants who received a check. And because of the amount of the number of people who applied, each eligible applicant received $3,500. We can tell you now that there's going to be a second application period next month. We don't have all the details yet, but one of the things we wanted to tell you, so please share with your members, is the application window, working with the Department of Revenue, will be August 10th through the 24th. It's going to be very similar in structure and format as before. Payments are expected to go out from the Department of Revenue in mid-September, and we expect those payments to be on a sliding scale. We don't yet know what the minimum and maximum of that scale will look like, but payments overall will not be as large as the first round simply because there's less money available this time. Out of the $50 million the governor made available, about $40 to $41 million was distributed to Wisconsin farmers across the state. So there's about $9 to $10 million available in the second round. One of the things that we've been able to do is adjust the eligibility so that it will include those who had at least $10,000 gross income in 2019. So more details to come on that. Again, we'll continue to appreciate Dan's engagement with us as we look to the eligibility standards of the next round, but we'll share more information with you on that as we go along.
Jennifer, you're muted.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Secretary Romanski is coming back. He mentioned that he has Wi-Fi from calling in remotely, so this isn't such a surprise, and it looks like he's coming right back in. So we've got another 9 minutes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you very much. My apologies. This is one of the challenges as we work remotely and adjust to COVID-19.
Hey,
So
Mr. Secretary.
Anybody who has interest in
Mr. Secretary,
Yes.
I've noticed sometimes when it's wonky, if you actually just speak and don't do the video, it works a little better. So you want to try that?
Okay, let me try that. I'll stop the video. Okay, let's see if this helps. Okay, well, let's continue and see how it goes. So anybody who has interest in the food security initiative can go to foodsecurity.wi.gov, and this is $15 million that the governor's allocated. The first round, called the Food Security Network Support Grant, is going to be grants totaling about $5 million. That funding is going to go toward helping food banks. Offer delivery options. That application has been open for 2 weeks. It closed Wednesday at 5 p.m. So tomorrow at 5 p.m. We are getting interest from a lot of from different areas of the state, and it's really important to help food bank with this task. A second round of funding will be Food Security and Wisconsin Products Grant. This is $10 million the governor set aside that goes towards helping food banks and eligible nonprofits purchase Wisconsin food products for distribution to people in need. Those, I mean, again, the governor often talks about connecting the dots, and what we're trying to do here is connect Wisconsin producers, Wisconsin processors, and Wisconsin consumers.
I feel bad about his Wi-Fi, so I'll just sort of summarize what he was recently talking about. The food security program, $15 million, that application is closing tomorrow at 5 p.m. And then another round's coming in, $10 million, another food security program, which will connect the food insecure people for $10 million to go to pantries and things like that. Secretary Romanski?
Okay. Yes. Yes. Thank you. So we are trying to focus on partnerships with these programs. So if there are organizations that aren't eligible, we are encouraging them to make connections with food pantries and food banks so that they can be included in their application, and we can make sure that quality and nutritious Wisconsin food can get to all parts of the state. I also wanted to talk a little bit about the federal USDA AMS food box program. So all the way back in April, when COVID-19 was first, coming upon all the states, we encouraged USDA to set up a food purchase and distribution program, much like Wisconsin has set up with the food security program. And they set it up through AMS. The criteria were not initially clear on the front end, and I look around Wisconsin and I see that we grow, produce, process just about everything that you can imagine. Of course, no citrus and nuts, but just about everything else. And Wisconsin was not particularly well represented, at least the products processing food product that was grown and made here wasn't particularly well represented in the federal program. The first two rounds, actually, there's some involvement, but not to the level I would expect. We've had an ongoing discussion with AMS Administrator Bruce Summers, just asking questions, trying to get more details about the program. And based off of some things that he has informed us, we are optimistic that there's going to be more opportunities to include more Wisconsin companies in the program in the future, especially for Wisconsin cheese. So hopefully other commodities as well. But we'll continue to make efforts to connect with our federal partners, try to connect them to Wisconsin food products. I'm glad the governor mentioned broadband. Broadband is not a luxury in Wisconsin, it's a necessity. No matter where you are across the state of Wisconsin, there can be connectivity issues. My example today would be one of them. I'm in Dane County, so it's an area that I don't have as good a services as one would expect. But no matter where you are, COVID-19 has really emphasized that quality broadband is really important, whether you're talking from a business standpoint or a child or a college student who's doing distance learning, remote learning. That broadband connection is really important. So the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation's Wisconsin Tomorrow report that Governor Evers mentioned showed that necessity of broadband, every industry, including agriculture, and talked about how critical it is to a well-functioning transportation network, agriculture industry, access to healthcare, a wide variety. So the task force will develop a report with policy recommendations that's designed to increase access to quality broadband throughout the state. And so the governor's budget included $48 million for broadband expansion in the state. About $24 million that has already gone out into the field to make improvements, dramatic improvements. And this task force is another way to ensure that people have access to high quality broadband in the state. I know we're getting close on time, so I'll just touch on some farm center programming really quickly. So for those who know it, and I know Dan does from his time at DATCP, but the Farm Center offers a variety of programmatic options for farmers in the state. Financial planning, mediation and arbitration, counseling vouchers, herd-based diagnostic programming of a variety. But we've also started to develop some additional tools that we can make available. We don't provide a lot of the farmer mental health programming. We provide resources to get people to things that can help them out. And so we've developed a 24/7 counseling hotline, as well as a telecounseling service. Both of these services can be accessed by contacting the Farm Center or through a standalone phone number. We've also started a podcast called Rural Realities, which explores a different topic related to mental health in each episode. And through July and August, we're also beginning a series of Question, Persuade, Refer QPR trainings. These are designed to help people who interact with farmers on a regular basis and help them learn how to recognize signs of mental health crisis and refer people to appropriate resources. And that's, of course, where the farmer mental health counseling vouchers come in. Again, we don't provide that service. We provide the resources for people to find those services. So with that, I know I'm coming close to the end here, the end of my time. So again, Jennifer, and to all your members that are joining today, thanks again for allowing me to join you. Thanks for the partnership as we all work through COVID-19 together. Because we are all in the response and recovery to COVID-19 together, and we look forward to continuing to work with you as we find solutions and work together to address things. So again, thanks for your time. I don't know if there's time for questions, but happy to field them if there are.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. That was terrific. I think that if there's any bright spot in this pandemic, I've been hearing that individuals are connecting more directly to their local farmers and learning that they can do that. And hopefully that'll exist well after we're done with this pandemic. And I think that has a lot to do with everything that DATCP has been doing. Thank you so much for joining us today. I don't see any questions, so I am going to go ahead and end this at the 11 o'clock hour. Thanks for joining us, everybody.
Thank you again.